Welcome to the British Empire Study Group. This is our February 13th meeting. And it's showing the one that I didn't want to show. My apologies. So I'd like to welcome everybody. If this is your first time attending, I hope you will join us in another meeting. If not, glad to have you here tonight. Okay, we meet online, and perhaps sometime we'll meet in the future in person. We do have a September meeting that will probably be a hybrid meeting, which should be really good. Okay, our next show will be on March 13th, and that is with David Handelman, and that's Avis de Reception. I don't speak French, in the British Islands and offices. So don't be scared. I had to ask what that meant. Also, and of course, you know what it is once someone tells you. That is the advice of delivery and return receipt, which is something that probably everyone is familiar with today. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Robert Lutens, to introduce the evening.
Thanks, Joan. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our program this evening, Fiji's 21st Century Provisionals, the temporary solution that lasted 20 years, with Andr Napier. We've got the right topic for the right month. If you've ever seen the movie Groundhog Day, then our topic this evening might seem familiar. In 1995, Fiji issued a set of commemorative stamps, Scott numbers 715 to 739, commonly known as the Bird series. Commemorative stamps, by definition, are stamps issued to honor an important person, event, or anniversary. They're usually printed in smaller quantities than regular issues and are only sold for a limited time, after which any unsold stamps are typically destroyed. Regular issues, or definitives, as some call them, are the workhorse stamps of the postal system. They typically pay the postage on everyday mail and are issued in a wide variety of denominations. Often, a particular definitive stamp design or denomination is used for long periods of time and sometimes reprinted to replenish a dwindling supply. Like Bill Murray and Groundhog's Day, these lovely little Fiji commemoratives, which were supposed to have their day in the sun and then retire, keep showing up over the years again and again and again. So that's our program this evening. A few words about our presenter. Andy Napier is Scottish first and British born and bred. Andy studied business management in the early 1970s. After working in industry for a few years, he left and became self-employed until retiring in 2019. Work had allowed him to travel widely, having visited Fiji 3 times, Singapore 3 times, Australia, New Zealand, Kenya, and Hong Kong, to name just a few of his visits. He first started collecting in the early 1960s and began specializing in Fiji by the mid-1960s, which has since become a lifelong pursuit. Now happily retired at home with just him and his dog Ben, he's found time to move into the editor's chair with the Pacific Island Study Circle. Andy is also their secretary, webmaster, newsletter editor, and society delegate to the Association of Scottish Philatelic Societies. He's also a past president of the Lanarkshire Philatelic Society, which remains one of the larger Scottish philatelic societies still in operation. Finally, as a result of his Fiji Island contacts and lifelong research spent on the philately of Fiji, he has had the honor and privilege to assist Post Fiji with the background and images for their 2021 stamps celebrating their 150th anniversary. So, without further ado, let me give you our presenter this evening, Andy Napier.
Are we going to introduce Steve? He did show up.
Steve's here, yep.
I'm sorry
about that. Here we go. We also have the pleasure of another guest this evening. Steve Zirinsky is with us from the Pacific Island Study Circle this evening. Steve's been involved in philately since the age of 10. Starting the day, his father dumped several thousand stamps in his lap and was told to sort these. He's now 64 and a full-time architect with his own practice, working and living in New York City with his wife, Paula. son Ethan, and Buddy the dog. Steve's a member of more than 20 philatelic societies. His focus has been on recent commercial mail usages from some of the smaller islands in both the Pacific and Atlantic, an interest that evolved into an understanding of local overprints. He's been a member of the Pacific Island Study Circle for 30 years and secretary of the Fellowship of Samoan Specialists for the last 20. He's been president of the Society of Australasian Specialists, Oceania, for over 10 years and a director of the British Caribbean Study Group for the last few years. Steve's also a part-time stamp dealer with an emphasis on the unusual. Recent commercial mail and revenues are the norm. He also maintains a monthly newsletter with special offerings. We'll put Steve's contact information into the chat box this evening. So, Steve, if you want to say a few words for us this evening. You're muted.
Sorry, had a little trouble there. My dog was trying to mute me. Anyhow, this is Buddy. Thank you, somebody, for shouting out to him. I saw that in the chat. Steve Zorinsky, I'm very happy to have worked on this presentation to get Andy to agree to talk at a late time for him. I'm, as Bob mentioned, I am president of the Society of Australasian Specialists, very interested in the Pacific Islands, just like the Pacific Island Study Circle. We overlap a little bit, but it doesn't really matter. We all have the same interests. And and I'm also very interested in overprinted stamps, which has always been very interesting to me, why governments actually wind up doing it. Andy's going to talk about the stamps, but for me, the overall arching formula or the scenario is that the government had printed a lot of stamps in the late 1990s, definitives, small stamps, and printed several, I think $7 or $8 million in Fijian currency of these stamps. And suddenly they saw the use going down because everybody was using email. And so they realized they thought they had a problem. So they decided to use up the stamps to revalue them. And they told people with stamp meters to stop using the stamp meters, so that way they could use up this quantity of stamps. They got nervous about having all these stamps wandering around. Anyway, it's always fascinating to see how governments try to handle the concept of when you go to the counter, you want to mail a letter. What happens? Well, in Fiji, they use overprinted stamps, and not just for philatelists. They're in use everywhere. I've been there only once, but I've been to 3 or 4 post offices, and they're all busy using the stamps like you would anything else. And it's the norm. Anyway, and saying that it's the norm, and now I will turn it over to Andy. We'll talk about the abnormal, maybe. We'll see. Anyway, I leave it to Andy, and thank you very much.
Right, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have noticed quite a few familiar names. So here's hoping I've got all the information correct. Fiji, the definitive overprints. First, a little bit of background for you. My notes, which go back to 2005, tell me that the post office were proposing a new definitive issue for the following year. Why? Well, all the stamps used in Fiji carry a fiscal value. Unlike some countries where they have forever stamps, or as we have in the UK, first and second class stamps, which we call non-value indicators. So stocks of stamps which reflected the current postal rates were a problem. So they were using multiple stamps to make up the new rates. And as a consequence, particularly low values were becoming low in stock and approaching exhaustion. Into 2006, the new definitives, or news of, dried up. But the problem, of course, still existed. The solution? Well, back in 1995, when they ordered the birds' definitives. They ordered an absolute mountain of them. And they had, and I hate to correct Steve here, but they had in excess of $10 million worth at face value in stock. So it made life rather easy. The birds' definitives, by good fortune or good luck, whichever you prefer, are printed in sheets which are broadly equal, the same size as an A4 sheet of paper. So setting up and maintaining a template should be relatively easy. It is, but as we go through this display, you'll see that the truth is slightly different. There are many, too many. In fact, I don't have anything like them all, of the errors particularly of these definitives. It proved very easy for me. I worked it out round about 2008, 2009, that if you used Microsoft Excel or Publisher, you could set up your own template to overprint a sheet of stamps. And that is something that you will see later in this presentation. Because the quantities required were substantial, the overprinting was contracted out. However, into 2018, the process was moved in-house. And again, Excel and Publisher, along with a bulk standard mono laser printer, have been producing the, as they say, a slight technical hitch. So what I've done in putting this together is I've taken each of the base values that were used for overprinting and put them in sequence. They're not in issue order, they're just following the base values that are used. So the first value that was used, as you can see, is a 1 cent definitive, which is overprinted to 3 cents. And there you have first day cover produced by a local Fijian-based dealer called Stephen Joe. Those who are members of the study circle will recognise the name very readily. These first day covers, he only produced round about 10 of them. So you could say that they are only in the hands of those and such as those, if you like. First print run, slight error with the positioning of one of the overprints. And it was the print run was stopped and corrected. Positional block there, which shows the error. Now, the printer has obviously done the invert first, realised the mistake, and just shoved it through, right way up. So you get a double overprint, applies to one sheet only to the best of my knowledge, and I presume was actually issued for postal use. I've never seen one on cover, but that doesn't mean to say that they don't exist. Right, a commercial cover. The inland rate at the time was 20 cents. So this is overpaid by 1 cent, which has a block of 4 and a vertical strip of 3 stamps. The next value to appear, 2 cents. Okay, again, a block and a first day cover, again done by Stephen Joe. Okay. Couple of blocks, slightly different types. In other words, font sizes, to use computer parlance nowadays. Slightly larger font size on the right compared to the left. And again, both these blocks came via Stephen Joe. And again, both of them were used for postal purposes. Couple of covers here. And you'll see a couple of errors. A gap between the value and the C for cents. Somehow or other, the printer has managed to introduce that. And as time goes on, you'll see how that particular error manifests itself. A couple of other little positional errors as well. But again, significant enough, and the gap is listed in the catalogues. And there you go, a couple of gutter strips which show type 1 overprint and the type 2 overprint, position row 6-1, and the gap on row 6-7. Few little errors. Printer was obviously trying to position the overprints correctly, but as you can see, we've got two small X's as the overprint, as the obliterator, but he's managed to displace it, and somehow or other, by not setting the template correctly, the overprint has come out on the middle of the lower pane only. So only 50 examples of that top stamp can exist. Two large X's for obliterators with different gaps between the new value and the obliterator. And again, these are probably trial prints, printers proofs. But again, it appears that these were actually used for postal purposes. One thing I'll say at this point is that Stephen was very good at liberating, shall we say, all these little errors. He was an almost, if not daily visitor to the post office, and he knew as well as the post office staff exactly what was going on and what was coming in. Then we go to a 4-cent stamp. So all the low values now are required on overprints. Again, block of 6 with a first day cover, again done by Stephen Joe. See the gap? Guess what? That's a revaluation of the 2-cent template. The printer hasn't noticed that there's a gap, so he's introduced it onto the 4-cent stamp. So we have it in a block there, and again on a cover, obviously done for philatelic purposes. And there you have it in gutter strip showing its position. As to how many sheets of these were actually produced, I don't know, but I would hazard a guess and say probably as few as 20 before somebody noticed and the errors were corrected. Right, this comes from a full sheet that I have, and you'll see that there's a poor inking on one of the values down there, but it won't, that's certainly one that won't appear into any of the catalogues. Now, as we saw, the first overprint value to appear was 3 cents. Now, all these images of 3 cents bearing overprints, I have rescued, as it says, from various websites. Now, to the best of my knowledge, and for that matter, anyone else, no overprints of this value were either issued or used by the post office. So they should be treated as printers' trials, printers' waste. But it is worth noting that the first 3-cent overprint appeared in 2006, but the 50-cent template didn't appear until 2014 with the 3 X's as the obliterator. So whether it was residual stock that was used for trialing, I don't know. I don't have any of them. I've seen them, and sometimes the prices being asked for them is quite mind-boggling. Now, 18 cents. A lack of 18-cent stamps for the inland letter rate as it was at the time. So instead of using the 1 cent for these, they decided they would use the 6 cent. So again, basic overprint and a first day cover. First 30 sheets, we have a misprint. The printer forgot or didn't measure the size of the gutter properly, I should say. So the first 30 sheets printed all had the 18-cent overprint towards the top of the stamp. So the positioning applies to all the stamps on the lower pane of each sheet. So we've got a block there, a cover with a block of 4, and a cover with the 2 different stamps there, both first day covers, again courtesy of Steve and Joe. Trial printing, printers trying very hard to get the gapping correctly, and as you can see, even though there's a double overprint, it has been through the postal system. Again, through the postal system, and couple of gapping errors as well. And again, the double overprints, although they are allegedly trials, they've been used for postal purposes, so even the trials were being used. Such was the need. 20-cent inland letter rates with an 18-cent and a 2-cent overprint. Commercial mail, proper commercial mail, just for a change. The increase to 20 cents for the inland letter rate, we needed a 20-cent stamp, of course. So, yet again, we've gone to the 6 cent. We've revalued the 18-cent template, but we've still managed to get an invert, postally used, as you can see. So again, it was a case of, if the stamps had the correct value on them, they were being used, whether the overprint was right, wrong, or, if you like, otherwise. Various other trials, a very narrow gap, positional errors again. I believe this bottom one applies to 1 sheet only. And again, a trial print with a different size gap yet again. But you'll notice that we're using large X's for the value obliterator rather than 2 small ones. And then we've got what's called the wrong value overprint, or the wrong template overprint. Must have been, or was probably, residual stock which had come back from post offices. It is known that the post office was recalling stocks of sheets from the post offices. So this sheet of 6 cents is overprinted using the 3 small X's, and it comes from 2008. Now we've got 2 cents on 6 cent because we've now used up all the 1 cent stamps. Okay. Oh, sorry. I'll need to go back a couple frames. Back one. Right. The 2 cent stamp came about because the post offices, as you see, said, well, you've put the rate up. We've got loads and loads of 18-cent stamps, but we now need 20-cent stamps. So give us some 2 cents. So as you can see, damn it, Andy. As you can see, we've revalued template and we've still got the gap between the 2 and the C, row 6, 7. Couple of commercial covers. One, as you can see, very slight shift, one correctly positioned, 22 cents, and of course, just for good measure, an instructional marking. And a correctly rated $1.10 to New Zealand, bearing 2-cent overprints. More inverts, corrections, gapping errors from a different print run. So the printer was obviously he was obviously messing about with the templates between print runs, and you get different gaps. This block I got from Stephen Joe. I have a feeling that although it's got a Suva cancel on it, it is actually a CTO. Then for some reason or other, the printer decided that rather than using X's, it would use a straight line. Don't ask me why, but the line came out in different lengths. And as you see, varies from 4 millimeters long to 17 millimeters. And anything in between. Then, yet again, he used yet another trial. The equal sign. I don't know what you call it in the States, but we call it the equals symbol, so we'll stick with that. 1, none, but mostly 2. And a 2 cent with 3 small X's just for good measure, because again, it's a return probably, and again, estimated at very few sheets. 4 cents. Out it comes again, displaced, misplaced. And apparently these 2 on the right-hand side of this frame apply to one sheet only, and apparently only to the bottom frame. So obviously the printer has misregistered the template. Overprints and displacements, and another commercially used cover to New Zealand, this time with a 4 cent overprint on it. And again, all these errors, misplacements would have been used for postal purposes. And again, we've got the 3 small X's, and again, very few sheets, again, returns from post offices. Must have been.
Andy, one question. Did the printer keep track of what he was doing from print run to print run? Because I know with, like, for example, in Papua New Guinea with personalized stamps, they would not keep track of the fonts necessarily or the colors, and so it was always a bit of every time they did a print run, it would just be different.
The oversight from the post office was, I think it's best to say, minimal. Right? And the reason I say that is, as you've seen from the quality, there's a distinct lack of quality control. And it was a case of get the stamps printed, get them out, because we need them. Right?
Well,
I think that's the safest way to put it.
I can see that, but the printer wouldn't do the quality control. He would just do the printing, and it would be up to, I think, the post office to decide whether they wanted to use it or not. Because it is currency, so they wouldn't want to.
Yeah,
it's not for him to toss.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know that and it will actually appear in a future frame. I do know that the post office tried to clamp down on the printer and get him to up his
Ah.
game, as it were.
Okay,
Right? But
thanks, sorry.
right, okay, no worries. But I say it was a case of print them because we need them and let's get them out there. I think that's basically what it was the case. And where are we now? Yes, you're saying correctly. We need a 1 cent stamp now. For postal reasons. It is the correct date that's on this, although this is not a Stephen Joe cover. This was done by an eBay seller based up in Lautoka, who got them done at his local post office. Right. We've got a 2 cent stamp and a sheet of 1 cents because he's obviously used the earlier template. He's revalued it. But of course, in revaluing it, the computer, if he's using one, has missed the fact that there's a gap between the 2 and the C, so it's ignored it. So you end up with a sheet of 99 1 cent stamps and 1 2 cent stamp. And as you can see again, it's in row 6, 7. So that again shows that it's a revalued template previously used.
Can I just interrupt again for a second? Well, one of the things is initially and all of these stamps are printed, there was no catalog for them. Each sheet was a new discovery. It was like a new ocean to explore. Yeah, you have to pour over each sheet to see
yes,
what's going on. You know, and there's nothing written about it. So if there's a gap, well, someone had to be the first person to discover it.
And that person was usually Stephen Joe, which is how he and then we managed to lay our hands on all these various errors or anomalies, shall we say. But as I said earlier, Stephen was in the post office, if not on a daily basis, then virtually on a daily basis. I also believe that he had contacts within the printers. So he knew when there was a delivery due to be made to the post office. So he would be down there waiting for it to arrive. Yep. And of course, he would then look round it and go, oh, goody, look at this. And as I say, if you look at that, we've got a 1 cent stamp on a sheet of 1 cent stamps, but we've got one stamp with 2 large X's as the obliterator rather than 2 small ones. Okay. Badly displaced, but again would have been used for postal purposes. And again, another 110 correctly rated cover to New Zealand. Now, the 6 cent on 6 cent. Well, you might laugh. This applies to 1 sheet and 1 sheet only. But the spacing is such on the sheet that as you go down the sheet, the overprint gets higher and higher. So by the time you get to row 10, there is no overprint at all. But you've got 10 overprints on 9 rows. Okay, and we've got 40 cent here with 3 small X's, the overprints. 13 cent stamps now. Now, these were very low on stocks because up until 2003, the inland letter rate was 13 cents. So it was a high consumption, a very high consumption value. And as you can see from the figures, there's only about 500-600 sheets in total were actually overprinted. And there's only 3 values with 2 large X's, the 1 cent, 2 cent, and 4 cent. We've still got different gaps on them though. 4mm gaps, 3mm gaps, and we've even managed to get a double overprint, one inverted. Now, how you can manage to do that on only 500 sheets, I'll let you work that one out for yourself. Work this one out. The 1 cent overprint correctly placed would have been done first. And then it's been overprinted, inverted. So it's presumably a trial printing. But why they would have done it and why they would have inverted it, I have no idea. Not one I have in my possession, but one, as you can see, I know about. Surprise, surprise, 13 cents, and again, these are probably returns from post offices. They appeared with 3 small X's, 5 of them this time. 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent, 4 cent, 5 cent. Okay, but there were very few sheets of these done, only about 10 in fact. Commercial cover to the marketing department at Post Fiji with a 4 cent stamp on it. It should have a 20 cent stamp on it. Now, all the sorting in Fiji is done manually, and all the cancelling in Fiji is done manually. So how that one slipped through the net, your guess is as good as mine. And you can just about make out the canceller which says 2011 on it. Right? 10 sheets of these, 50 cents with 2 large X's. These were discovered, as it says, late 2022. To the best of my knowledge, none were sold or used for postal purposes. They were all sold off to the philatelic market. I know I managed to liberate, I think I managed to liberate 3 sheets. I didn't keep them all. I did pass on the other 2. But it's only 10 or so sheets of these are known. Were they trials? Possibly. Were they done and then forgotten about? Possibly. Who knows? But they were discovered nonetheless. Now, the 18 cent stamp, same design as the 13 cent, which came out in 2003 when the inland letter rate was increased from 13 to 18 cents. Couple of inverted overprints for you, neither of which I have. And this overprint is actually only known inverted. I've never ever seen one with an overprint the correct way up. So we've now used all the 18s, all the very low values. We're now on to the 23 cents. Gaps. Spot a familiar face? The gap between the 2 and C. So printer's still not managed to correct that gapping error. So again, sheets of 1 cent and 23 cents were printed. Apparently, there was 200 sheets before it was actually finally corrected. Gaps again, positions again, because if you look at the top row, you'll see the 2's exposed, but on 1-3, you'll notice that the C is exposed and the 2 is obliterated. So the positioning of the overprint is still debatable, questionable. And again, right? Then we finally decided we're going to use the 3 small X's as the obliterator, as standard. or at least that's the way it should be. So we've got standards, misplaced, well displaced, and inverted. And again, all of these would have been used for postal use. So again, you can still see that the quality control from the printer or by the post office or both was still not very good. Now, this is a trial printing, apparently. It applies to only 10 sheets, 2 large X's. And there you have one on piece, so obviously used. And it would appear it's the only part of the cover I have, so I don't know if there's any other, what would obviously comes from an airmail type letter. But again, is it a 4-cent stamp? It's been used instead of a 20-cent stamp. Your guess is as good as mine. Correct sheets, displacements again, positioning, feeding problems into the printer, inverts, they're still appearing. And again, first day cover done up in Lautoka by a relatively well-known eBay seller, I would hazard a guess. 2-cent stamps required, but we've still got positions. But we're now using, as you can see, the standard 3 small x obliterator. Now, we've got a completely new value, 5 cents. The currency in Fiji, as it is in Australia and New Zealand that I know of, now works in a basic 5 cents. And you needed to buy a 5-cent stamp because, as you can see, bank stamp duty still applied at that time, which meant that bank documents had to have a 5-cent stamp fixed to them, charged for, and then duly cancelled. Now, I can just about remember bank stamp duty in this country, and I'm sure there'll be others scattered around the world who have similar, very scant memories thereof, if at all. So that was the principal reason for the 5-cent stamp. But as you can see, somehow or other, we missed the obliterator. Now, this is not a first day cover. Done by said eBay seller up in Lautoka. Cancellation date clearly says 15 June 2009. However, as you see, the post office records had it confirmed to me that the correct first day of use is the 9th of July 2009. So somebody has taken more than a shade of a liberty in producing that and marking it as a first day cover. It most certainly isn't. Right, here we go again. Inverts, double overprints, and a philatelic cover. I've again with a Lautoka stamp on it. Doubt if it would have been Stephen Joe, but it might have been, with the strip of 4 making up the 20-cent inland letter rate. Now for the 20-cent stamps themselves. First of all, the CEO dictated no further overprints were to be done. Probably because he didn't like the quality of he or she, I can't remember who it was at the time. Somebody may be able to help me out in that one. All right. I have no idea why. Now, at one time, Post Fiji had meters in each and every post office, but they ceased use in either 2004 or 2005 because the post office wanted to use stamps, right? As Stephen said in his introduction, it was easier for the postmasters and the post office to ping the letter through the meter, and of course the consumption of stamps went down. I also believe that the meters that they had were on lease. So it's possible that another of the reasons why the meters were withdrawn was that the lease agreement expired. And of course, the use of stamps was a convenient way of getting around that, or not mentioning it. Don't ask me why he's produced a 20-cent stamp with 3 large X's, because we've already had small X's on all the other values. All right. Now, real mishmash here. No overprint at all. No C displaced. 2 large X's. 2 large X's. All noted as trials. And again, all produced on the 12th of April 2008. The equal sign, the bottom one is not 2 equal signs, it's 2 long lines. The middle block, the now standard, but we've got gapping positional errors because you can see the 2 of the 23 is visible. And we've got a new constant variety introduced. Now this no gap variety ran until the overprinting became in-house in 2018. More on that later. Right? So it's a constant. An invert, which again you can see has been used for postal purposes. And a first day cover, again from Stephen Joe. All right. Now we've got some skews. Right? Print was down to a combination of the printing machine and the condition of the stamps. What you have to remember is in Suva, the stamps are stored securely, obviously, but they're not in a climate controlled environment. Now, Suva has quite a humid climate. So the PVA glue on the back would have absorbed some of that, so it would cause the sheets, even though they registered correctly, to skew ever so slightly if the gum on the back was slightly tacky. So as you can see there, virtually correct on the right-hand side, but well skewed by the time you get to the left. But the post office did, by this time, start getting a bit stroppy and told the printer to get a new machine. Right, and a philatelic cover from this time from Sigatoka. And you'll notice there are narrow gaps between the 20 and the obliterator. And a few other errors just to compound the felony. Right, again, all of these would have gone into post office use and have been used for mailing purposes. Right, cover to me, commercial cover to me from, as you can see, Stephen Joe. And there you go, proves that even the displacements were used and valid for postage. And this is a large 20, which is a large figure 20 produced from a different template of a different value, which has been uprated. And as you can see from the pair, gapping, positioning, large gap, and a narrow gap. All of these again down to quality control. Now, here's a good one. A 3-cent overprint was required. Now, this came about through postal needs, but not because the post office wanted them. Hotel group on Fiji's Coral Coast, which is the west coast of Viti Levu, basically in and around the Singatoka area, Singatoka up to Nandi, essentially. Why did they need them? Well, they wanted to do a mail shot to previous clients, USA, Canada, Japan. Previous rate had been 87 cents, and they had stamps of said value in stock. They needed 3 cents to make up the new rate. So they asked the post office to do the necessary, and the printer said, aye, okay, but we need to do 100 sheets, or we will do 100 sheets. Okay. And the printer made a bit of a mess of it. Clearly a rush job. As you can see, spacing and positional anomalies all over the place. Even a missing 3. As you can see there, that's the top pane. And the lower pane, you've got gapping and positioning errors as well. Now this sheet, I say 1 of 100. Now these sheets were eventually made available through the Philatelic Bureau. The Bureau staff initially decided to remove the stamp with the missing 3, but in doing so, they managed to damage the surrounding stamps. So they then decided, well, we'll just leave it and we won't charge for it. And the reason they wouldn't charge for it was because the 23-cent original value had been obliterated. So a sheet was charged at $2.97. And then somebody I knew was a member of the Pacific Island Study Circle, went into the Bureau and said, well, you've got 99 3-cent stamps and 1 23-cent stamp, so that's what I should be paying you for. And they actually refused it. Those of us in the studies and who are in the study circle will remember the name Peter Rhoda. I believe it was him who had that interchange or exchange with the Bureau staff, because even though he was retired, he still lived in and around Suva and was in and out the Bureau on a regular basis. We've got a new printer, and the quality, to be fair, did improve. Post Office also mandated that all templates other than 3 small X's was to be destroyed. But as you'll see, that didn't quite happen. 3 cents, 4 cents, 5 cents. As you can see, not properly registering, but not too bad. We're now using a new machine, but we've still got no gap, row 710. And as you'll see, continues to appear for some time to come. 23-cent stamps stocks were exhausted, so we moved on to the next value in the series, 31 cents. And these came in to use over a period of time during 2011. 1 cent, 2 cents, 3 cents, 4 cents, 5 cents, and 20 cents all came into use, all using the 3. But we've got slight skew, we've got poor inking, we've got displacements all over the place. So the quality is still a bit variable, shall we say, to say the least. Double overprint. Looks like a heavy inking, but it's actually a double overprint. A skew, displacement, double overprints, both displaced, still happening and still being used for postal purposes. Whether it was the machine or whether it was the sheets or the operator, I'll let you all decide for yourselves. They all existed, they were all used. Right? Now, all the templates were supposed to have been destroyed apart from 3 small X's. Oh no, they weren't. There's a 2 cent with 2 large X's. But if you look at the strip, you'll see that the overprint is correctly positioned in the top pane. There's nothing on row 6 at all. And rows 7 to 10 all have the overprint displaced to the centre of the sheet. And that is an extract from a complete sheet of that I have. Now, whether there's more than one of those sheets or not, I don't know. 1 cent trials. Missing a value, over obliterator in the wrong place. And again, the left-hand stamp appears to have a heavier overprint than the right-hand stamp in that bottom pair. Whether these were used for post office purposes, I don't know, but what I will say is, to the best of my knowledge, they weren't. So they're probably trials or proofs. And the same applies to all of these 20 cents. Again, you've got a no gap, narrow gap, displaced, and 2 small X's. Don't have a full sheet. I only have these examples, but whether the gapping is consistent, what the position of these various overprints is in relation to the sheet, I honestly don't know. Now we come to 23 cent stamp. Now this one is a bit of a weird one, because for the life of us, we've been trying to figure out why the post office needs a 23 cent stamp. None of the rates that we can think of require 23 cents. And again, as you see, this 23 cent on 31 was not discovered until late 2022. Now, the 23 cent with the 3 X's didn't appear until 2021 itself. And again, these were sold off to the philatelic market. And again, probably residual stock or return stock, one or t'other, but certainly used. Right, now we come to a new value, 40 cents. 2012, post office moaned and groaned at government, we need to put the letter rate up because it's costing us 25 cents to process a letter, but you're only allowing us to charge 20 cents. Now, how does that come about? Well, the post office in Fiji is a private limited company, but it is essentially an arm's length company under the aegis of the Ministry of Finance. Right? It does have a board of directors, which is appointed by government. Now, whether the board of directors is paid or not, I don't know. Right? So, but it's safe to say that the board of directors is basically a buffer between the Ministry of Finance and the Chief Executive Officer. So when, they have to have, unlike lots of countries in Fiji, they have to have government permission to vary letter rates. Okay, so we've doubled the letter rate to 40. But we need a 40-cent stamp. We don't have one, so we've revalued the 20-cent template and we get the 40-cent stamp. And lo and behold, what have we got? We've got the no gap value error anomaly on row 710 as per. Print quality still not very good. Displaced overprints again, as you can see, postally used. So again, it's a case of they're overprinted, they've got the right value on them, we're using them, we're selling them, we're using them. 50 cents. Now this was required because the 15-gram airmail rate to Tonga requires 50 cents. So they revalued the 20-cent, the 40-cent template to 50 cents, and guess what? As you can see, we've still got the no gap error. But very few sheets, only 100 of these were printed. An extra 5 somehow or other crept in. Don't know how, because obviously they've revalued the 40-cent on the 20-cent template. But we've got an extra 5. And again, thanks to Steve and Joe, some of these managed to escape even though the post office had noticed them. And of course, one of them managed to wing its way halfway around the world. Now, post offices said use small X's, fine, but what they didn't say was make sure you're using the same template, because the large 20 appears. And as you can see, the large 20 template has a couple of extra anomalies in it. You've got the no gap, row 710, but you've also got a no gap, row 89. And just for good measure, you have a missing X on row 1010. Work that one out. I've no idea how he managed to do that, considering that he was using a previous template. 40-cent trial proof. This goes back to 2009. One sheet only, totally different font, and it was used. Why they would have done it in 2009, I don't know, because there was no 40-cent rate to the best of my knowledge, or best of my memory even. But nonetheless, it was done with 3 small X's, and it was postally used. Right, dirty overprints. Right, these won't appear in any catalogues, but as you can see, and you can see from the central gutter on the 1 cent, the roller has become contaminated, and it's managed to make the whole stamp very grey, dirty. They left a dark overlay. Right, so we're using a different machine, but for some reason or other, I suppose it's down to the printer make, you got a slightly different and thicker type. So these were done while the machine that was contaminated was being cleaned up. Some canned comments. Right, these are probably trials. They've all appeared in one way, shape, form or another on said well-known auction site. The 44 cent on the right with an 80 cent over and a 90 cent overprint looks as though the printer's been having a bit of fun, perhaps after having a few too many Fiji bitters. Now we're up to the 44 cents. And again, with first 3 overprints that appeared were 20, 40, and 50. And as you can see, we've still got the no gap on each of the 3 varieties. 1 cent, we still haven't got the gapping and positioning correct. And then if you look at the block on the left, the 6 cent, you'll see that the overprint, although slightly displaced to the left, gets slightly lower with each succeeding row. So that by the time we get to the bottom, half of the original value. So obviously it hasn't set up the template just quite correctly. Gapping and positional errors still appear. So the quality of the printing's not that clever. Here we go again. 20-cent stamps. Now we've managed to lose a C. We've got no gaps where previously there were gaps. Displacements, inverts, and double overprints. Again, all used for postal purposes. 23 cents. Now we've gone back to using 2 X's for some reason or other. Why a 23-cent overprint? Well, I finally got an answer on that one fairly recently from one of my contacts in the post office. Because there was a 23-cent stamp originally in the series, the post office ordering form lists a 23-cent stamp. And as you can see, the answer I finally received was, well, we're doing them because postmasters asked for them. Can't argue with that, but why, I don't know. We've got 2 large X's when there shouldn't be, and again, position and gapping errors alongside 3 small X's. Then in 2018, the overprinting requirement greatly diminished, and they decided they would bring it in-house. Now, as I said earlier, it's relatively easy. I have a template set up in my computer that I set up late, maybe 2008, 2009, something like that. I used Excel to do it. So it's not difficult. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Right? But it was done by somebody, it wasn't done by somebody who had lots of training and knowledge in setting up Excel or Publisher to produce the templates, because the first few weren't exactly of the best. And there you go, in-house overprint machine. As you can see, my own handiwork from when I was in Suva.
How do they account for all that?
Sorry, what was that?
How do they account for it? You know, in terms of, the accountant must have gone crazy because, you know, all of a sudden you have 23-cent stamps, now you have 1-cent stamps, and you have 50-cent stamps, now you have, oh my goodness.
Well, I'm assuming that what they do is that on the computer, a stock system, that they have to enter how many sheets they've drawn for overprinting to 3 cents and revalue the stock holding, the face value revalue the face value stock holding to the new value and write off the old value as essentially a loss, if you like, a loss on stock value. Because at the
Andy?
end of the day, if you don't sell the stamps, you don't get any money for them at all. All you've done is pay for the printing.
Hey, Andy, I am going to start bringing people over because I want to be respectful of their time. So
Yeah,
that way, because I know you have some more to go. So as you go on, you'll just see people popping in. Okay?
right. Okay. Right, so the COVID effect overprints. Now, the person who was tasked with doing the overprints, of course, COVID ravaged Fiji the same as it ravaged everywhere else. Right? And as you can see, this sheet was done in-house. Now, I'm going to show you 6 panes in total. This is the first one. This is version 1. And you'll see we have 2 large X's, 2 small X's, gaps, 2 small X's, gaps all over the place. This was the first attempt by somebody other than, and as you can see, the little red arrow factory was on overtime for the bottom pane in this sheet. Right, you've got large X's mixed in with small X's and 2 X's, you name it. It was a real mishmash. I think when I counted them recently, I think on one sheet of 100 stamps, there are 20 of these little arrows pointing out various anomalies. So 4 out of 5 were bordering incorrect, 1 in 5 was incorrect. Right, version 2, we've tidied up the play a little bit, quite a lot in fact. Still got a couple of positional errors there. We've still got 2 small X's instead of 3 down there, but we've tidied it up substantially. All right. The lower part of the version 2 of the 1 cent, we've still got row 10 with 3 and 4 with 2 large X's and a couple of positional changes, but substantially tidier. Now we've got version 3. We've introduced a spacing error for some reason or other. It's not there before. Row 3-1 still has a positional error or a gapping error. Position, don't pay too much attention to the size of the X's down there. That's a scanning. My scanner must have gone slightly pear-shaped when I was doing these. But as you can see, the overprint is not correctly positioned. 6 cents with 3 small X's, but again, gapping and positional errors. And a 20 cent with a missing X row 99. And as you can see, this is a cover which was actually sent to me, but it doesn't, the cover doesn't prove where the anomaly exists, because whoever made it, or whoever made up the cover to it for me, forgot to leave the margins on. Thanks a bundle. Now some 23 cent COVID effect stamps. Again, somebody else somewhere along the line has made them. We've now got no gap and 4 small X's, would you believe? And they appear in a couple of positions. 2 small X's, 3 small X's and no gap. 2 small X's. The rest of the sheet, not bad. Slight positional anomalies, but we can sort of forgive them that. And again, I've got some canned comments because I don't know. I've seen them offered on said well-known auction site. I do not believe these are probably trials, possibly trials. They may be forgeries. I don't know. I certainly steer clear of them anyway, let's put it that way. But the simple fact that it's, if they're consistent, one row with overprint, then a blank, then an overprint, then a blank, and the same goes horizontally as well. It does make me wonder, let's put it that way. Because it's possible that complete sheets were able to be bought. Now, the next few frames we get through quite quickly because the final three values that they've used for overprinting are the 63-cent stamp. And as you can see, there's a whole range of values that they overprint to. Not only that, but to accelerate philatelic sales, and I'm guilty as charged, they've overprinted them using both 2 large X's as obliterators and 3 small X's. So 63-cent stamps, I've just put in a few examples for you. These 2 anomalies were done by the post office. The top one, askew, very badly skewed. I managed to rescue that and split it amongst some colleagues. And the same goes for the displacement and the overprint on row 10 of the 50-cent. These are images that I have when the template was being made up. You'll see there's no C against the 44, no gap and no C on the 65. And if you look in the middle block, you'll see it says 424 and no C. Now these were removed from the sheets. They certainly haven't appeared in any mail to me, where I believe they were destroyed. These are again of dubious parentage. Again, they were offered by a Fiji-based seller, this time not Lautoka-based. Whether they are correct or not, again, I can't comment. I certainly don't have any of them. 81-cent. Now, the 81-cent has appeared twice as an overprint. Back in 2016, by mistake, just one ream, 500 sheets were done. But as you can see, there's a few gapping and positional anomalies associated with it. And then during 2024, again, and as you can see, there's a whole range of values to which have been overprinted, again, using both versions of the obliterator. All right. 2 and 3 cent inverts. I can't comment on the 2 cent and 3 cent, although I can't say that they are not legitimate. I can't say they are. I don't have them, but it's entirely possible that they've gone through the printer upside down. The 50-cent does exist. I have one myself, which came from the post office. Top block here, it looks like 22 cents. It isn't. It's a 2 cent double overprint, which was inadvertently done. And the whole sheet, all 100 stamps that were done, and it applies to one sheet only, resides here in Scotland. 50-cent with 3 cents, 3 X's, again inverted. Again, it came from the post office. So I'll assume it's released for postal use. Few other can't comments, misplacements, missing values. This is one that certainly raised a lot of eyebrows. A vertical strip of 3 cents with a 4 cent in the middle of it. I don't get that one. I doubt very much that that's come from the post office. And then last but by no means least, the $1 value. Again, both X's, both versions of the overprint. And we go right up to $1.10. Right? 2 large X's only on the $1.10. There's no 3 small X's version of that one. And you'll notice that there's a gap, row 1, 2, which I've since been told has been corrected. This 110, you saw it in cover a while back, was one sheet that was done as a trial to accommodate the recent rise from 1.7 to 110 for the 15-gram airmail rate. And again, these are a few others that have appeared on the scenes on said well-known auction site. I certainly don't have any of them. Whether they're correct, right, wrong, or otherwise, I'm not going to comment. Now, we're into 2025 and going beyond. The one remaining value in the Birds Definitive series is 87 cents, which I've been told will not be being overprinted. The only other value is $5, and that is too high a value for overprinting. So my guess is, and it's a very strong guess, is that the overprinting series or the overprinting exercise is coming to an end. So what about new definitives? Well, in one phone conversation, mention was made of a new definitive series featuring birds, but this time being in collaboration with China Post. I've got nothing confirmed, but what I do know is that there was a delegation from Post Fiji in Beijing at the guests or as guests of China Post the middle of last year, late June, beginning of July 2024. And I know that there are constant and ongoing discussions on many things between Post Fiji and China Post. However, going forward, using the information that I gleaned from one source, I mentioned to another source, didn't let on what I knew, and I said, well, I'm not a gambling man, but if I have a crystal ball, I'd be betting on a new definitive series next year. And the response, as you see, is, your very crystal ball may very well be correct. And that's a quote. It would therefore appear that the post-Fiji overprinting saga is coming to, or has even come to a close. So as they say, normal service will be resumed shortly. Right, and now for something completely different. I noticed a friend of mine online called Terry Woods. Terry will recognise the tagline. This comes from a TV programme going back, I think, to the 1970s, that was based in the UK called Monty Python's Flying Circus. And their opening tagline was, and now for something completely different. It was sort of off-the-wall comedy programme. Rob, in his introduction, mentioned my ties with the post office in Suva, and that I had been involved in collaborating and assisting them with their 150th anniversary issue. Photograph myself, the two ladies, Alvina and Jani, the philatelic bureau staff. At the time I was in Fiji, Isaac was their manager. He's now CEO. And Isaac and I share a love passion for rugby. Isaac is in actual fact a Fiji rugby international. Okay. An email that I received, this is from Anjani, you can see the date, 2021, blah, 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 I need your assistance. The shortened version is that between us, we produced 4 stamps, which as you can see on cover, a first day cover. The background is the Post Fiji head office building in the centre of Suva. And as you can see, the cover is signed by former Prime Minister Bainimarama. And indeed, I have 2 pairs of these in my collection. The date, the 18th of 12th, was the first day of issue and the date on which they had a huge bash in a local, you would call it a convention centre, sort of, in Suva to celebrate. And there was only 20 pairs of these covers produced. $15 mini sheet, again, signed by Prime Minister or former Prime Minister Bainimarama. And the image you can see is the old Suva post office, probably dates from the 1920s and actually comes from a postcard that I have in my very small postcard collection. Not only that, but I got lumbered with writing all the issue notes for them as well, which I duly did. So I had to get the books out and make sure I got the research correct. That was all done, and the stamps all came out. And that, as they say, ladies and gentlemen, is that. If you've any questions, I shall do my best to answer them. I don't profess to have all the answers, but if I can, I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. That was a wonderful presentation. Very, very in-depth. I've got a question myself. It seems to me like the bird issue became printer paper for whatever they wanted to use it for. I mean, it didn't seem to have any correlation to value.
Basically, Rob, it was a case of we need stamps of a certain value. We have stamps of another value. Let's make them that value, overprint them and get them out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a philosophy that applies solely to Fiji. There's a number of other colonies, sorry, not colonies, but territories around the world who've done overprints. Steve, I think Samoa have done them as well. Steve may be able to confirm that, but I have certainly seen overprinted stamps. Papua New Guinea, from memory, have done overprinted stamps for a number of years as well.
Tonga as well.
Sorry?
Tonga overprinted.
Yeah, there's quite a few. So it's not a novel idea. It's a you know, given that the vast majority of the stamps that were overprinted were for inland use or within Fiji use, it makes sense to use up what we've got rather than just have them sitting there and then find that the glue, the gum, the PVA gum has caused sheets to stick together. Now, I know that some sheets have ended up going through the shredder or into the incinerator because they ended up as a clump of 4 or 5 sheets that just stuck together. So it was a case of, in a way, it was a case of if we can use them, why not? Because if we don't use them, we're just going to lose them and waste them.
Andrew, what surprised me was that so few of the stamps were actually rusty because they have been in Fiji in the tropics for 30 years, and all the examples you showed seem to be very clean and white.
Well, believe me, as time has gone on, I have got quite a few sheets of these. Now, I have something of the order of 250 sheets of these overprints alone. And believe me, particularly in more recent years, the sheets have come in with showing signs of gum tropicalization rust as standard, shall we say. Not to any great extent, but it is starting to show face.
The other one in regards to overprints, I think British Guiana, or nowadays Guyana, would probably be the most famous because they actually overprinted some of their archival stock back to the 1890s, I think, as an economy measure to just use government-issued stamps and reuse them nearly 100 years later. It would be possible, surely, for Fiji to continue to do these overprints on any other philatelic stock they've got of any other issues.
Well, I know that I believe that the stock holding of all stamps is now very greatly reduced. I don't know what the face value is of what they have, but I do know, I remember asking a question sort of in very, very general terms, and I was told that our stock holding is way, way down. You know, they've resisted the temptation, as they've done in the past, to sell off, you know, the older special issues and things like that to the philatelic trade, or cancelling them to order and selling them to the philatelic trade, something like that. But from what I've heard, what I've been told in, you know, in odd conversations when I've mentioned them, the stock holding face value is, it's probably quite probably still in millions, but it's very low millions compared to double figure millions that it was even as recently as 2019 when I was in Suva.
Also, you know, setting up each issue is a bit of an experimentation. You know, at least these stamps are all the same size. If you start taking, you know, some of the commemorative issues, you may not have, you know, 500 reams of these things. You might have one or two.
There is that to it. You also have one of the things that you also have to take into account with the special issues is that the sheet size is different. For instance, I know there are stamps that have been produced in sheets of 32, 2 panes of 16, sheets of 24, 2 panes of 12, sheets of 40, 2 panes of 20. You know, when to overprint all of those or those, my own feeling is that it would create even more anomalies than it probably would create correct stamps, because you'd be chopping and changing the templates and resizing and repositioning, you know, on a regular basis. And the other thing to remember about the special issues, unlike these Birds Definitives, the values don't always appear in the same position on each value in each special issue. So if you've got a special issue of 4 stamps, you might have the value in the bottom left corner on one stamp, the top right corner on another one. So you've got to constantly chop and change or make up new templates if you're going to overprint them.
Mm-hmm.
I see that
I
David.
suppose another issue, Andy, might be that the actual sheet size is too big to fit in the printer.
Well, when you oh, hello, Les.
Hello, Andy.
The answer to that probably yes as well, because you know they're using a bog standard off the shelf printer. right? Now, if the sheet size is wider than A4, in other words, greater than 21 centimeters wide, then it's not going to fit through the printer. So you're going to have to try and print them sideways, and that in itself creates problems. Or you might end up having to split the sheet in two so that you can feed them through, and that means you've got to create two templates. So, I mean, to do the special if they wanted to do the special issues, I would be, I think it would probably create a heck of a lot more work than they've already created for themselves with the overprints that they've done on these standard size stamps.
David, you have your hand up. You have to.
Thanks. Have you ever talked to anyone from the Treasury Department? Because the Treasury must have been holding these stamps on their books at the printing value, so that they didn't matter what value they got printed on them, because they were holding them at a much lower value on their books. That would be most unusual. But have you ever talked to anyone from the Treasury Department?
I've never talked to anyone from the Treasury, David. Or the Ministry of Finances, they would call it same thing, different name.
Right.
My guess is that, or I speculate certainly, but I would suggest that the writing down on the overprints and the valuations, etc., would be treated as an internal matter for the post office rather than a matter for the Treasury, i.e. government. Because as I said partway through, although the post office is wholly owned by the government, government doesn't run the post office. It's run as a private company. So I would think that it would be down to the post office to make those decisions and then perhaps have to justify them.
But that would give a very bad incentive for a post office to take a 65-cent stamp and overprint at 1 cent, because that would be a huge loss on the post office books. There must be something else going on behind the scenes there.
Well, there's nothing going on that might be construed as dubious. Let's put it that way.
I wasn't suggesting that at all, Andy. I was
No, okay. How much, if any, input government has in the overprints, stamps, I honestly don't know. I say, the Ministry of Finance speaks to the board, and the board then speak with the Chief Executive Officer. And so the board is effectively a buffer between government and the post office management. So I would think it's purely and simply a post office management decision as to what we're doing with these stamps.
Tony?
Oh, right. Thank you. Andrew, what is happening regarding the catalogue listings of the dubious issues? I don't particularly want them listed as a catalogue item. I think they should perhaps be listed as, yes, these items are not official, and otherwise they'll still keep appearing on sites like ePay and all that. They'll still keep appearing there.
what can we do about getting the very dubious ones where they were not even on the right stamps or whatever? What can we do about getting rid of that?
Well, so Tony, that again, you'll recognise the name I'm about to mention, Brian Jones.
Yes, very, very aware of him. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you would be. Yeah, Brian Jones and I and others talked to the Gibbons catalogue editor, Hugh Jeffreys, fairly regularly. And as far as Gibbons is concerned, Hugh's policy is that if he will catalogue the overprints if they have been issued and used, provably being used for post office purposes. So, the examples I showed you where the phrase I used was dubious parentage or questionable in heritage, if you like, I would suggest will not appear in Gibbons. Now, I don't know about Scott's or Michelle, or any other catalogue for that matter. It so happens, you mentioned some of these dubious stamps. I know I was talking to somebody who has recently joined the study circle and who had recently acquired some of these 3-cent base value overprints. And he hadn't realised that the 3 cents had, in all probability, never been used for postal purposes. And that's the unfortunate thing about eBay or these auction sites, not just eBay, I hasten to add. I mean, I see examples of other stamps being proffered on auction sites, right? Some of the Queen Victoria forgeries, just to go off at a slight tangent, being offered as a genuine article on auction sites, and I quite often email the seller, and if I get an answer, I'm doing well. If they amend the listing accordingly, I'm doing even better, because they know that there are gullible folk out there and they will buy them.
I think maybe it's time for someone to produce a catalog of buyer beware. And yeah, you show a listing of the different various stamps, and if people want to collect them, that's up to them. But at least
Yep, I hear what you're saying, Steve. The problem with them is that first of all, it would be a massive job cataloguing them all. The second thing is trying to prove that these have not been legitimately produced, shall we say. Because so many people have been involved in it, with the post office, the external printers, all the rest of it. It's entirely possible that something which I've listed as dubious isn't dubious at all.
I find it quite strange that after such a long period, all of a sudden these particular overprinted values can appear, and it is it is just incredible that this can happen, whereas it just shouldn't happen. And perhaps there does need to be volume 2 of the Brian Jones book, which perhaps has more, and then could even say, well, these items are are basically fraudulent and should not be considered for your collection.
Until proven otherwise, because
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, certainly. I hear what you're saying, Tony, and I know from talking to Brian, as I do fairly regularly, that the thought of the topic of producing a book 2 on the overprints has crossed his mind on several occasions, but the fact that we've now got 15 years of catching up to do, I think it's sort of putting him off more than somewhat.
But a lot of this is easy to say, but I know somebody who's recently produced a very good PowerPoint on this subject that could perhaps be, is that what you need to hear?
Well, believe me, Tony. I speak to Brian. Oh, well, when I say speak, I mean email Brian. Oh, once or twice a week is wouldn't be an exaggeration. And I say yes. We have discussed the topic of putting our collective heads together in producing another book. Les Bootman, who I know is also on here this evening, Les would be a very good source of information in helping us along those lines as well, because I know he enjoyed a very good working relationship with Stephen Job when he was alive.
I think most.
So the knowledge is out there. It's a question of pulling that knowledge from however many sources.
Yes, I think a lot of us have already can claim fame to having well contributed to Stephen Joe's superannuation account. For
You and me both, Tony.
Yes, I know. That's good.
I know he was able
and a few others, I'd wager. And as I said, I'm not a betting man, so. But yes, no, I mean, let's face it. Stephen fell into an open gold mine. Realized what he was looking at, and like any good businessman, made the best of it he could. I mean, I don't fault him for using that philosophy at all. If I'd been in Suva and had the kind of access and availability to lay my hands on the stuff, I know I certainly have done it. As I'm sure would you, Tony.
Indeed, yes. I must admit, I still tend to get quite large quantities of the 1 and 2 cent overprints of sheets, and but that is, it is not always easy to procure. It's just a matter of accumulating them.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure that what they're producing the overprints in batches of 50 sheets or 100 sheets of any one value at any one time. I get the impression, again from several discussions on the phone, that it's a case of we print to order. So if we need 10 sheets, we only print 10 sheets.
Right. That's right.
If you email the bureau and say I want 2 sheets of each value on, let's say, the $1, just for example, they will print you two. They will specifically print you 2 sheets of each value on the $1.
But the problem is then getting them to send them to you.
Right now, they're way behind.
That is certainly true. And strangely enough, before I came on tonight, I was actually I wasn't on the phone, I was messaging Suva, and it was a comment I made that it's about time. And the comment I got back was, we're actually working on catching up on standing orders at the present moment.
Mm, mm. That's right. We've been hearing that for some weeks now. Mm.
Yeah, I think the basic problem is that the bureau isn't a full-time bureau anymore.
I know they regularly go off to, although they were regularly going off to the cruise boats to make an appearance on those. But
They're still, yep, that's right. They're still doing that.
Yeah, there's not as many boats now as there used to be.
Right, they still go to the cruise ships, and the thing is, if they go to, right, what I do know is if they go to do a shift on the cruise ships, and it happens to be a Saturday or a Sunday, then they get a day off in lieu during the week.
Yeah, fair comment. Yep.
So, not only have they spent a day on the cruise ships, but they've lost a day's work in the office.
Mm, mm, mm.
And I know that although you'll know from Anjani's email that her title is Team Leader Philatelic Bureau, but I know that she spends a lot of her time working on developing new issues.
Mm.
So right, and Alevina is she now does the vast majority of the overprinting, but she also has to do philatelic bureau stuff. And the third member of the crew, who I've not met, is Louisa. She works in the bureau, but only part-time, because she actually works on the philatelic counter in the main office downstairs for the other part of the time.
You think we should start asking now for some overprints of the new Chinese issue?
Well, I'm going to wait and see what comes out of that first. With my other hat on as editor of Pacifica now, having taken over from Brian Jones last year, as you'll know, Tony.
True.
Part of the reason I was messaging Suva before I came onto this meeting was to mention to Anjani, because particularly that I was looking for the quarterly post-Fiji update by the end of the month for the next magazine.
Mm.
Because I happen to know that she's off on her jollies to New Zealand to her daughters at the weekend.
Ah, right.
Right, her eldest daughter, married eldest daughter, lives and works in Auckland, and she hasn't seen her one and only grandson since he was born this time last year. He's just coming up to his first birthday.
It's a wonder they haven't got her to stay on a couple of days and go to the Royal Pex exhibition as the Fiji counter.
All right,
I don't know if they know anything about would know anything about that, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, I mean, I say I happened to find out during the week that Anjani's off at the weekend with her husband to Auckland, because it's the wee man's first birthday.
Ah, right. Well, that's worth doing. I must admit they're very personable to speak to, and it's always an interesting conversation you have, and of course every conversation you have with them, well, that just puts them back further in the time they can spend on their job.
Yes, you're right, Tony. They can be quite easily distracted from their work. I mean, I know if I phone either Alevina or Anjani, and I've on my notes, I've maybe got 2 or 3 things I'm thinking, okay, 5 minutes, I'll cover this, no problem. Half an hour later, and I'm still yattering away to them, or they're yattering away to me.
I do know this feeling, yes.
I
All
thought
right,
you
Andy.
might.
Andy Jurgen's been waiting here. He's got a question.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. It was very interesting to see the many various overprints. And over time, I was asking myself how it might have been printed. What kind of printer are they using and how are they preparing the printing plates, so to say? And now you already mentioned that it's done locally in the post office or in the stamp branch, whatever. And
Yeah.
from looking to the results, if I had to do it, my best guess was this is just a Word file, and I would use a free laser printer to do these, especially because the gaps you showed are the same, so as if they just would do with a change all, replace the 2 with a 4 or a $1, and or the rest of the layout and the registration problems appear to be more or less constant. Might this wild guess hold somehow true, or is it done more professionally? Do we have any information?
Right. Well, prior to 2018, late 2018, it was done at a commercial printers. Right.
Even
Now,
the
I have
overprint.
no idea what kind of setup the commercial printer used.
Okay.
Right. As I said, I walked out back in 2009, 2010, so there or thereabouts. My brain must have been in, working in lateral motion, something like that. And I'm thinking, how can you do this, or how do you do it? And I worked out that you could use Excel. I also worked out that you could use Publisher. And these are two programs that I use, regularly for my, mounting my own stamp collection. So I knew that, and I'm thinking, well, if I can do it and I can make it picture perfect, why can't they? So it's down to a lack of, was it training, or was it a case of the print operator, the person who was doing it, was poorly paid? I mean, and then they got the offer of a better paid job, so they toddled off to a new job, and somebody else came in who was at the bottom of the food chain, who didn't know what they were doing. And so it was a sort of, if you see what I'm getting at, is rinse and repeat. It was somebody who was learning on the job, learned how to do the job, and then disappeared to another job, and then somebody else came in and had to learn on the job, and so the cycle repeated.
Sure, but agreed. However, it looks as if it's kind of a repetitive task, and my assumption would be, if it's done more or less professionally, then a new plate should have maybe new errors, but not repeating the exact old ones. So is it likely that it's really just a kind of office style program and not professional printers equipment being used here for the preparation? Because otherwise the various overprint values should have other differences and not just repeating the same spacing trouble.
Yeah, well, I quite agree with you. I mean, it's, as I say, it's down to, I mean, these were, proper, this was a proper print company that they initially contracted the overprinting to. And one version I heard was that, there was a change of print operator. They didn't know what they were doing, therefore they made a mess of it.
Yeah.
So
did you ever try
if that was something that was being repeated, then it explains to an extent. But I quite agree with you. I mean, I know when I sat down and worked out on Excel a template, I worked out a perfect template that would have printed perfectly time after time after time. And as I say, I'm purely self-taught on the computer. So if I can do it without any outside training, surely they could have.
Yeah,
So,
agreed.
you're in a way, you're correct. It's a lack of professionalism on the printer's part.
If you have originals at hand, did you ever try to figure out which kind of printing technology has been used? Is it letterpress? Is it the laser printer or offset,
Laser.
or what are they applying?
Currently, it's a laser printer.
Well, from 2018 onwards, it's certainly a bog standard mono laser printer that you would buy in any computer shop.
Wow.
Right? I mean, I have a laser printer sitting next to me in my computer here. Okay, it's not bog standard, it's a small office version, but the technology is the same.
So then
Now,
let's do some 87 cents overprints and push it to the market. We own the technology by ourselves. Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I say it was, all the anomalies, particularly the early ones, were purely and simply down to a lack of quality control, A, on the part of the printer, B, on the part of the post office, because, as I say, my reading of the situation at the time was, we need stamps, we want stamps, so let's get stamps, basically. And as long as it looked approximately presentable, then it was a goer. We'll use them. Only in extreme circumstances did they say, "Oh no, we're not going to use that, or we're not going to use that."
Okay, thank you.
All right, great question, Jurgen. Charlie Mead, you've got your hand up.
Hello, Charlie.
You're muted.
Yeah, now you can hear me. Yes, hello Andy, thank you.
Hello, Charlie. How are you doing?
Yeah, not so bad, not so bad. I remember when these overprints first came out, having grave concerns about them because I could see immediately exactly how they were being produced. I think the first printers were Star printers. I forget where they're based, but they had problems with the feeding of the sheets through their laser printer. So they've been laser printed ever since, from the beginning. But they're so easy to forge. As you've found out, you can create the template in no time you used Excel, I used Publisher. That they are so easy to run off that I had a chat with Patrick Pearson, the late Patrick Pearson, who was then chairman of the expert committee at the Royal. And the consensus was that because they're so easy to forge, they would eventually not be catalogued. So that's the depressing outcome of that little conversation. That's going back to must be about 15 years ago now. It is very sad that it comes to this with our hobby, but we know that they are being forged. There are some really bogus values out there on base stamps that were not overprinted. As far as the accounting's concerned, I don't see that as being much of an issue. I mean, the stamps have been overprinted, well, certainly in Fiji. I mean, the first overprints came out during Queen Victoria's reign. So, the accounting for purposes, I don't. That's been done and dusted years ago. So I don't see anything to worry about there. But it's a sad indictment of post Fiji. I mean, they're lovely staff, but they're not terribly competent, and their quality control is abysmal.
I don't think you'll get much disagreement from me on what you're saying there, Charlie. Yeah.
I suppose one consideration would be that when they were first produced, these overprints, post Fiji were under severe budgetary constraints. they couldn't afford to get a new definitive series designed or printed, and so they just went on the lines that they did, on the basis that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They've got the stamps. They want to use them rather than sort of pay for new ones. So
not
even though a first world country, the post office would just sort of scrap the old stamps and print some new ones. In post Fiji, they didn't want to do that, and they couldn't afford to do it, and that's why they did what they did. And at the end of the day, when the overprints were first released, they were not issued to any of the existing subscribers to the Fiji Philatelic Bureau, because post Fiji didn't actually realize that stamp collectors would be interested in them. So that wasn't the motivation that started it all off. And I'm not arguing with you. They are very easy to forge because of the way that they're printed. But that wasn't post Fiji's consideration at the time. It was a case of expediency.
Yep, that's very true, Les. One thought that did cross my mind, and was 2006 was also the year of the Bainimarama military coup.
Right.
And that might have had some kind of bearing on governmental finance. Now, whether it did or not, I don't know. But certainly, it's something that may or may not have to be considered in terms of post office financing and for that matter, other government departmental financing as well.
Actually, that's quite correct, because along with the coup, there was a freeze on international aid, and so Fiji was very short of foreign reserves. So that may have been a consideration as well. But again, I've got no evidence to support that theory. Les, you may have, or you may have heard from Stephen that was the case, but I certainly don't have any evidence to support the theory. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of it's conjecture, Andy, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the old story. You can make the circumstances fit if you put your mind to it.
Tony, do you have another question?
Yes, indeed. It's perhaps interesting to note that originally, in the early days of these, they were not available to overseas clients. These were supposedly only for local postage usage or for local usage, and as such, if I tried to buy them, they wouldn't sell them to me. And it was only after many calls and many discussions with them that they finally decided that they would sell me some. So that's quite a difference. But also too, if the paper is, I don't know, perhaps slightly damp or whatever, and sometimes the actual laser printing doesn't actually stick to the stamp, and it is fairly easily removed with a soft gum eraser. Has there been any effects from this that you've heard of or seen?
I haven't heard or seen anything, but what you're saying, Tony, would not surprise me in the slightest. I use a laser printer at home here, and I know I've been able to remove minor blemishes on a print. A printout from an A4 sheet by using, as you say, a soft pencil eraser. Yes. So again, that's why some of these overprints with missing C's or missing X's have to be treated as dubious.
Very true.
Because it's certainly and of course the face side of the stamp, let's face it, has a glossy finish on it. which will mean that the overprint may not stick, for want of a better word, as well as it might otherwise do.
That would show up under ultraviolet, though, I would assume.
Well, I've never tried that. Never tried that. But they are quite spectacular. Some of the sheets where there is the skewing on the sheet, they're really quite spectacular, where it not only skews up and down, but sideways as well. And, you know, they make quite an interesting item by themselves.
Well, I mean, it again means all you need is one tacky bit on the back of a sheet on the gum side, and you'll stick to the roller and you'll send it sideways.
And I find it also quite interesting that, particularly with the misplaced overprints, I find that suddenly you'll look and you'll say, oh yes, it's quite fine, but the overprint is actually misplaced a whole row, and you'll get the overprint up in the interpane selvage or at the bottom, and it's quite incredible that it's such a huge overprint difference.
Yeah, I mean that's things like that are more than likely down to just poor feeding, or if they were using the sheet feeder on a printer rather than manually sheet feeding, then that would account for things like that, Tony.
And I noticed that I don't think you mentioned anywhere the overprints were on the back of the sheet.
I didn't. That's very true. I probably, in fact, I know I've got one or two sheets overprinted like that. Yes.
Do you mean offset, or you mean reversed, or you mean just they printed it back?
Printed on the gum side.
Misfeed.
I don't think we're looking at offsets in the traditional meaning of offsets, where the ink has not been dry. I mean, if you're using a laser printer, when the print comes out the printer, it's warm, so the ink is dry, or it should be dry. So this there are overprints on the back of sheets. I do know, going back to, I think there's some on the 18-cent, there's some on the 23-cent. Les will know better than me on that one, probably. I know I have a sheet of, I think it's 44 cents, which has been printed both sides, but it's obviously printed both sides.
It's a common mistake, though, for a trained operator to accidentally put the sheet in upside down or reverse starting edge, bottom to top.
Do they charge you 88 cents?
Sorry, well, I missed that.
Do they charge you twice the price? Do you do both sides?
Well, certainly the one sheet that I can think of that I have would have been treated as printer's waste. Yes.
It's quite interesting. I think also what you said was that if there is one sheet, if there's one stamp in the sheet that's got 1 cent instead of 2 cent or whatever, you don't get charged for the whole sheet. You don't get charged for 100 2-cent stamps. You get charged for 99 2-cent stamps plus 1 cent stamp.
Yep.
They're very precise, and they're very particular like that. It's novel to hear it in this day and age.
All right, Fred Deans, have you got a question?
A couple comments. On the type of printer being used, they're currently using one of the HP printers, one of the business type printers, the 3-in-1 or do-it-all type printers that you can scan, you can do all sorts of things with it. But it just sits on the desk there in the Philatelic Bureau office. It's not the white printers that Andy, you were showing. They've gone to a HP black format printer.
They've obviously upgraded since I was last there,
Yeah,
then, Fred.
right. They have. But anyone familiar with those printers knows that it's very easy to get misfeeds if the paper is damp or wrinkled, or if the operator is not paying attention. I've got one sheet that was obviously used as an email to print an email, and then they realized, oops, wrong paper, and so they just reprinted it with the overprints. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stories like that. I mean, that's all very familiar. But they try to be conscientious about letting those email sheets go out. She was not very willing to sell them to me, but I enjoy going there, and I go down to Fiji every year now, so it's a matter of stopping over to the Bureau.
All right.
Yeah.
So you go to
Charlie,
Suva then?
did you have any follow-up?
I'm sorry?
I said, is Charlie Mead, do you
Oh,
have
yeah.
a follow-up?
Yeah. I think it's important to understand how laser printers actually work. They don't use ink, they use toner, which is a polymer, a plastic polymer with the color embedded in it. And that is then fused to the piece of paper that you're printing on. Now, the base stamps that have been used for these overprints in Fiji were offset litho printed by Enschede. And litho ink is oily ink, and there will be a certain incompatibility between the laser print toner and what it's being printed onto, which I think explains why some of the printing has lifted off and flaked away. And I think if you were to put them in cheap plastic wallets, you'll find that you could remove and then put some pressure and leave it for a little while. You would then find you could lift the entire overprint off. As for the skewing, I don't think that's anything to do with dampness of the paper. I think this is purely down to the operator not doing their job properly. They've opened up the paper guides to put the sheets of stamps in, and then forgotten to close the guides again, so that the paper then can slide sideways as it goes through the printer, and that would account for the skewing, which I've seen many times on just commercial printing in offices. So I think that's the explanation there.
I think in that instance, though, there have been recorded instances of where two sheets of paper have basically sort of stuck to one another because the gum's been damp, and that's caused the blockage. It isn't necessarily the guidelines being sort of moved within the printer, that the paper has sort of been held back by getting stuck together. I mean, when I do laser printing at work, occasionally the paper sort of does that.
Yeah, but that usually causes a vertical displacement, not a lateral one, which is what you see with the skewing.
Well, it depends how it sticks and where it sticks.
Well, basically, it will be vertical because that's the direction of travel of the paper through the machine. If any lateral movement would be down to the guides not holding the paper perpendicular to the direction of travel. So it's a paper guide issue.
Yeah, but in any case, printing on sheets of stamps being gummed and being perforated, that's not exactly the definition of proper printing matter, what should be fed into the thing. So it's quite interesting that this is working at all, and it might be quite interesting if we have some spare sheets of stamps to do it in our own printers to see the results, and I would guess a lot of skewing and misfed paper would come out. So they must have found some way to maybe feed it sheet by sheet or whatever, because I doubt that the automatic feeding mechanism would be able, with this uncommon way of printing material, to do it properly automatically, but that's just guessing.
All right, do we have any more questions this evening?
Just another question unrelated to the previous questions. I'm creating a database or spreadsheet of sheet numbers of all the different values so that we can maybe get a better idea of how often the sheets were reprinted, the values were reprinted, et cetera, et cetera. And if anyone is interested in contributing to that, their sheet numbers or what I'm trying to come up with, I'd be happy to share.
I'd be willing.
Okay. In the chat, I'll put my email.
All right.
Where are you? Oh, you're there now, Fred.
Pardon?
You were on top. You were top left-hand corner a second ago. You're now down the right-hand middle. Anyway, no, I shall work my way through. As I said, I've got something like 250 or thereabouts complete sheet spread.
Yes.
So it will take some time to work my way through them all.
Whatever you can provide, I'll input
Right,
into
and I've also got a package which is somewhere in transit, so I'll hold off, if you don't mind, until I've got them and got them sorted out, and then you'll get the whole bang shoot in a oneer.
All right.
All right.
So
Well,
Fred,
Andrea, I
if we
think
get any inquiries, we'll send them over to you. Sorry, Rob. You're wrapping it.
Andy, you've had a global audience tonight. I just want to give a shout out to one standout here. Michael Torreggiano was on a ship off of the Falkland Islands this evening,
Oh, wow.
watching the program. I was impressed with that.
I saw that earlier. I saw it earlier when he as part of the participants, and I thought, well, I won't tell you what I actually thought, but the two words rhyme with clucking and bell.
Yeah.
There's probably more Scotsmen living down on the Falklands than there are around you, Andrew.
I don't know about that.
Evening, Tony.
G'day, Steve. How
One
are
thing
you?
I will say,
right.
Rob, is that it was interesting. I know Jeff from Canada because I've seen him in the study circle. I see John Ray hiding in the background there.
Yeah.
A good mate of mine in my local society, Terry Woods, has just disappeared. So no doubt I will get some feedback, inverted commas, from him at our next face-to-face society meeting a week tomorrow. But you know, and of course I know Fred, Charlie, and quite a few other names that Les, of course, names that jumped up, and I went, oh yeah, I know them.
That's good, that.
So,
Yeah.
and the saving grace is that all the names I've mentioned, plus a few more, all will know my email address anyway. So, guys, if you've got any feedback, don't be shy. Ping them into me. because at the end of the day, it all adds to the global knowledge, if you like, on the subject.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you Freds will agree with me, Charlie and John as well, that none of us knows everything about the subject. And if we can if we manage to pool our resources and get something together, from any number of different sources, so much the better.
Right.
Actually, once they start on their new definitive sets, it then puts a line in the sand, if you like, where, you know, your new book, Andrew, can have a stop.
My workload, Tony, is up to there at the minute.
That's okay.
and I'm
He doesn't
and-
have enough work to do.
Andrew, I'll make
And
another
I'm supposed to be retired.
Andrew, I'll make another comment. Based on the information that I've been able to put into the spreadsheet so far, it's almost very evident that they are doing print on demand, because I've got consecutive sheet numbers with different values.
Yeah. So have I,
Interesting.
Fred.
Yeah. So,
But Fred,
know,
Fred, you said something interesting. You said something about them reprinting the bird definitives. Did they do that?
no, I didn't say
No, no, they're not going to be reprinting the 1995 set, Steve.
Okay.
From what I gather, this is a completely new design, but it's still going to feature birds.
Got it.
At least that's my understanding from the conversations I've had so far. I say everything is very much unofficial, airy-fairy. This is possibly going. You get the drift. Right.
Possibly, maybe.
That recent souvenir sheet that came out from China, well, you know, that China printed for Fiji, with the birds on it. That might be a clue as to
where it's going.
Going, and the designs and the format and how it's going to look.
Right. I've no evidence to support the theory, but I suspect you're very much on the right lines there, Fred.
Andy,
it may also depend upon the current relationship between the two countries at time of printing.
That week.
Sorry, what was that, Steve?
Oh, that $15 sheet that you designed, I saw that at the post office. That's heavily used. You know,
from what I gathered, stocks of, well, I didn't design it. What I did do was I supplied all the images for that $15 mini sheet. I worked my scanner extremely hard at 1200 DPI. In other words, full steam ahead.
Right.
And what I will also tell you, Steve, is that when I asked Anjani, who was taking the lead on that issue, what she wanted for what stamps she wanted for it, her comment was, "We'll leave that one up to you. You decide, and we'll go from there." So, if I got it wrong, you can blame me. If you liked it, I'll take the compliments.
Fair enough. But my point was that the sheets might look pretty and all this other stuff, but they get heavily used. I mean, because they don't have that many high values in Fiji. You have a big box and comes in with customs duty. They have to pay. They put the stamps on it. It goes. They run out of stamps.
Stephen, I'll comment that I know at least some of the post offices are using the 2000 millennium stamps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know one person 2 years ago shipped a box and it had 6 full $60 sheets on it.
Yeah.
So they're
they're using them.
That's all down to the fact that all postage, whether it's a letter or a parcel in Fiji, carries stamps.
And it's interesting if
You'll-
what happened in Tonga is any parallel. For example, when COVID hit Tonga, people are not flying around in planes so much, and so all of a sudden the post office's use for parcel service went right through the roof. And so you can, a lot of the islands, you're going to see a lot of that. You know, so a lot in terms of
Well, one
use.
thing I have noticed on this side, Steve, is that airmail times from Fiji to the UK are anything up to a month.
Yes. I didn't say it was faster. I
Right.
didn't say that.
Australia, I had an eBay that came in this time last week, which was just over 2 weeks in transit. But strangely enough, I still get mail from both Canada and the States in 3 or 4 days. So transatlantic mail is fine, but longer haul mail is extremely variable.
Yes.
In terms of delivery. And I mean, that applies both ways. I mean, for instance, to give you an example, I always send both Anjani and Alevina a small Christmas gift, which I usually post at the beginning of November. But the parcels arrived 2 weeks ago at the beginning of February. So it took virtually 3 months for the parcels to get from the UK to Fiji. You know, so mail time, parcel time, things like that is extremely slow. I mean,
I send out orders.
The last
you know,
package of overprints that I got from Fiji, I think took 5 weeks to get from Fiji to the UK.
Huh. Yeah, it can happen. I send out orders all around the world all the time. And you know, invariably someone says, "How come it's 5 weeks now? And didn't you sent the thing out to Australia?" And I think, "Oh yeah, it'll probably show up tomorrow." And that's usually what happens. A day or two after someone emails me, it shows up. But again, it can be like 5 days or 5 weeks. Just no way of knowing.
Yeah, I know when I was in Fiji, I actually sent postcards. Okay, granted, postcards back home to myself, and you know, if I posted them on a Monday, they arrived on Friday. The same
Did you
week.
did you send them short paid?
No, I paid them full paid.
Oh, that's no fun.
Right. And I say this was before COVID. The same applied to Australia. I posted postcards back to friends from Australia. 3 days later, they were delivered. You know.
Yeah, well, it's a different world. It's a different world now.
Yeah, I mean, I put it down to the fact that long haul, particularly, they're using smaller planes which have less cargo capacity. Therefore, some cargo has to sit and wait until it gets a seat.
Right, and I think along the same thinking, it has to do with priorities. Because if there's a disaster and things have to they have to ship material, that goes. Everything else waits. And the mail is not considered
It's
a vital,
not high priority.
It's not a vital service like it once was.
Yeah,
because everybody has emails that can communicate, still can communicate.
Yeah, I mean, I will remember an auction lot that I bought from an Australian house, well-known, respected auction house in Melbourne. And it was sent to me registered mail, and it actually sat in Melbourne airport for 10 days before it got a seat in the plane. And when I tracked it, I knew when it had left. 3 days later, it had arrived in the UK. But it took over 2 weeks to get here because it had sat for 10 days in Melbourne airport waiting to get on a plane.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, Charlie, that's a great background.
Oh, you like it, do you?
Yeah, you are so talented.
I saw that. Very envious.
Yeah.
I recently bought a very comprehensive collection of these Fiji bird stamps from a client who passed away very recently, but was a very good spender with Steve and Joe. I can tell from the invoices. I've got a small range of emails that were sent to him in the 2015-2016 period, which are from Stephen, and they're very detailed about issues and unique items being offered and so forth. That might be of use to any of you writing on the doing some sort of research, given that some of the items are claimed to be unique and only put aside for this man. So you may not be aware of that information. I don't know.
Certainly not something I'm aware of, and I don't see any nodding heads apart from you, Tony. But yes, information like that is invaluable.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to just forward forward. I'd have to scan because I've only got hard copies. But there's nothing personal in there to the gentleman concerned, and he is deceased. He was a fellow I knew very well. Lovely man. He worked in Fiji for some time, and he had an absolute passion for the country. And in fact, he had a fearsome collection of Fiji from the Fiji Times up to date. And he collected these things with a vengeance. I can see invoices for 6,000 and for 5,000 and so forth. So he was buying single items rather than sheets, or he was buying positional blocks. But I'm happy if one of you want to contact me. I'm happy to send you scans of those emails in case they are of interest or of use.
Good.
Yes,
Yes.
Stephen.
You want me to do that? Want me to talk? I'll get it from Tony, then spread it around.
Yeah, I can send it to you, Steve. Yeah, no
Information
problem.
like that, Tony's invaluable.
The shame is that he's only sort of got probably like a 6-month period, because I think unfortunately people tidying up the estate perhaps disposed of that, or he had already done so. But he was quite meticulous, and I'm sure on the computer would have had all of that information, but that's lost now, I would think. A sad aside to that, let me say, is that the first part of the collection, which was almost complete by SG numbers from number 1 to 1952, and he did have the majority of the Fiji Times, which were purchased from Gibbons over the years. He had certificates with all the inverted overprints. There were a number of cake fairs and various other things, and that was all stolen from our office just before Christmas with a massive.
Oh, that was part of that. Oh,
it's part of that. So I don't know what the thieves are likely to do with it, but there was some very rare material in amongst this. The chap only collected mint. If it wasn't mint, he didn't want it, apart from a small number of covers. I don't unfortunately have photos of most of it, but if you happen to see a magnificent collection of early Fiji, mint with some very rare stamps in it, including some of the perfs of even some of the things like the halfpennies issued in 1890 odd that are catalogued at 3,000 and 4,000 for those particular perfs. Most of those were in the collection, and they're now held by culprits unknown.
Oh, Tony, it might be, if you can email me a list of what went AWOL, we can perhaps put something into the next issue of Pacifica.
Yep.
And that will certainly alert our specialist collectors that this material is out there. It's been nicked, and if you've got any information, you'll feed it back.
Yeah, that would be appreciated.
Yep. Email it to me. Ben, be quiet. editor@pisc.org.uk.
pisc.org.uk. Yep.
If you email me the bones of what you've got, the information you've got, I'll put something together, run it past you.
Yep.
Our next issue is due at the end of March, beginning of April anyway. So I'll actually be starting working on that next week now that I've got this out the road.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Right. So at least it will alert our members who are specialists, to keep a lookout if they see anything being offered that's perhaps being very much undersold in terms of price.
Yes. Yeah. The shame is I'd actually pencil priced it all. So although they know nothing, they can just see what the figures are. But anyway, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Say, whatever you can give me in terms of information, I'll put something together and then run
Okay.
it past you,
Yep.
and then we
I'll
can
do that.
we'll
Thanks,
go from
Andrew.
there.
Andrew and Steve, do you guys keep some of this information on your website for members only archive? Because I heard you will email everything around, but then when you get new people in and new researchers into the hobby, they won't have access to all this great knowledge that you're sharing because it's all on individual machines. So just a thought that you might want to think about, archiving it in a more accessible and transferable place.
Well, it could be posted on the PISC website forum, I suppose.
Well, something. Well, Charlie's the chairman of PISC, John's the secretary. Perhaps maybe something we have a chat about next time we have a committee meeting, Charlie.
Yeah, certainly, yeah.
I'm just thinking of future generations because they won't be here to ask you, and it might be very valuable for them to.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, John.
Don't forget, Andrew's doing a book.
Yes.
I'm glad you're laughing as well, Charlie.
Well, I think someone's got to tell Andrew he's doing the book first.
Well, that's another thing that I've seen done with collaborative censuses, with people posting their images and keeping them all in the clubs. Usually it's a members only section, sometimes it's public, but it's really useful because if you do have something, you could add it. It gets screened, of course, by some admin, but it helps communicate what people have without having to send it all to like one person. Send it all to Fred, and then Fred gets overwhelmed. Because it's just so sad. I've seen so many people work so hard and then something happens to them, honestly, we'll speak honestly. And then all that research and stuff is just gone.
Isolated.
Yeah, it's true. So I guess maybe the idea is to, as a study circle, try to put together, a series of monographs that slowly get to be added to. You have to start off with the first draft because then all the mistakes come up.
Well, certainly David Gillis's book on the Fiji government print office francs, we had a collaborative census for that before the book was published, and that census is an appendix to the book. So there's no reason why it can't be done again.
Yeah. Yeah, official francs of Fiji. I have 100 pages. It took me a long time to figure out how to organize them, in terms of how to categorize them. And sometimes the categories change because of the telecommunications would sometimes include movies and TV and all the drove me a little nuts.
Yes.
Must be 1,000 marks.
All right.
Yeah, but
I'm going to say goodbye, folks. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Tony. Andrew, you must be tired too. Well, you said you're retired, so you could.
You can do what he wants.
whatever you want.
It's okay, John. I've got the keeping awake juice in front of me.
And just so, just to toot the horn of the Society of Australasian Specialists, in 2 weeks' time, on the 27th, New York time, Paul Woods of UK origin is going to be talking about Samoan revenue stamps. And so, tune in for that. I'll send an email around
Yeah.
to those on my list.
There's a good friend of mine up in Aberdeen in northeast Scotland who actually was a school teacher in Samoa and has a brilliant collection of Samoan material. Once I get the invitation, the information, Steve, I'll pass it up to Alex. So you may well get an Aberdonian. And if you've got
What's his last name?
Sorry?
What's his last name? Alex?
Alec Walker.
I know him. Okay, good.
I know Alex too.
Do you?
Oh, yes. He's
Right.
on the Stamp Forum, our online forum.
Yeah. No, Alec, I know personally. I know him reasonably well, but he actually lived and worked and taught in Samoa.
Good on him. So he's a member.
Right.
He's a member
So,
of FOS, Fellowship of Samoan Specialists. I know him from
Right. I shall certainly make him aware of that, Steve, for you.
that. I think he knows.
Alex,
He probably has the email. What? Sorry.
I was just going to say, Alex just had a heart attack in the last week.
Has he?
Yeah.
I
He was,
I saw him literally 2 weeks ago.
yeah,
He
it
was-
happened last weekend.
Wow.
Wow.
I didn't know that, Rob. Obviously, news travels to you in the US quicker than it does to me 120, 30 miles away. But no, seriously, I was at a meeting, the Scottish Society's meeting. We have you mentioned the ASPS, Association of Scottish Philatelic Societies. And we had a face meeting literally 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. And I had a long chat with Alec then, because I know him quite well.
Hmm.
And he was absolutely fine.
I think he's recovering.
A heart attack is one of these things that hits you like a brick and then says hello.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. So what do you say? Should I go and feed Keith? It's 9 o'clock here almost.
Whoa.
So,
Peter breakfast.
Is it?
Thank you very much, Andrew.
That's what it is.
yeah,
It's
thank you, Andrew. That was fantastic.
It's a
And
great
Steve,
food.
thank you.
2 o'clock in the morning.
Organizing it.
And your timing's wonderful, Joan, because my glass is empty.
Next time you have to bring something for everyone, Andrew.
That's it.
There we go.
No, nobody gets their hands on my 15-year-old single malt whiskey other than me.
I got to talk to Ben.
Yeah.
He's still sleeping, but as soon as I move, he'll want to go for a quick walk before he goes to his proper bed.
Yeah, I've been given the evil eye here
He's
by the
probably
dog.
trying to work out why I'm still awake at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Right, Fred, you need to send me your email address and I'll send you some sheet numbers.
Okay, I put it in the comments.
Yeah, Tony, if you guys want, we'll coordinate it because you have our email addresses.
Let me, yeah.
and comments.
Yeah,
So
I-
we're happy to coordinate.
And I have everybody's email pretty much as far as I can tell. So if anybody wants something, just let me know and I'll forward
Okay.
it on.
All right.
Yeah,
Tony, I'll make sure
fair
I
enough,
get your
Steve.
email.
I mean, don't be shy using my editor email. I try not to use my personal email for stuff like that. It stops the
Yeah.
spam.
That's all right.
Right,
Tony,
but I mean, if you use editor email, if anybody wants to contribute via that, then fine, no problem.
Right.
Yeah, I know
Tony,
you've
I'll
got my
have your
personal
email, so
email,
I'll-
Fred.
I'll contact you.
Yeah, I know you've got my personal anyway, Fred. It doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
I try often unsuccessfully to keep my personal email, like my phone numbers, private, so that spam and junk and God alone knows what else is kept to a minimum. Doesn't always work, of course, as we all know.
Well, I want to thank you, Andy, again. Of course, now you're going to have to start with the overprint starting in 2025. Going forward, any overprints you got to keep track of for a new version of this for your next version of your Fiji overprints. Gone mad.
Well, hopefully we won't see very many more.
Well, that's
Well,
what I'm wondering. I'm
I
postulating.
honestly don't think we are going to see any more at all, Fred.
Okay.
Right? I say the only, as I said, the only value that's not, it's in the series is 87 cents. And I've been told that it is definitely not going to be done.
Yeah. And they made one of them made the comment that they're trying to use up all the sheets. One of the reasons why so much is coming out right now is they're trying to use up the sheets before they deteriorate anymore, and they can't use them at all.
That's right.
Not having $5.
Yeah, that aligns with what I've been hearing as well, Fred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
That's why my bills, for want of a better word, to post Fiji over the past few months have been absolutely astronomical. And I can see John Ray sitting there nodding his head in agreement.
Yeah. Glad you've got the pockets for it.
Yes,
but
there has been a serious assault on the wallet.
On the Scottish pound.
John, I don't know about you, but John and I both always try to get at least one complete sheet of every overprint. So it won't take you too long to work out how much money we've spent recently.
Well,
I get the idea.
$300 is not hard to spend right now.
But it's
Well,
interesting.
I get the impression that in the US it's getting a lot easier to spend money right now because everything's going up in price like a bloody rocket.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably true.
Remember, I have the eject all button.
But
I couldn't resist.
It's interesting because earlier somebody had talked about how if you're in a first world country, you would just throw these stamps away. But a lot of the island countries, they just think of it as being thrifty and being economical. They have the stamps sitting there. If they're not rotting at the bottom of the drawer, you got to find a way to use them. It's just it's an island. You don't get rid of anything. You use it.
Yeah.
That was why the stamps were produced in the first place, because it wasn't that they wanted 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent stamps per se. It was because they had reams of stamps with denominations of 44 cents, 42 cents.
Yes,
exactly. And they wanted these makeup values to make it absolutely so that they could actually use them.
Right.
That was
it's sensible thinking. Yeah. I mean, a lot of St. Vincent did the same thing. Some of these countries just did overprints on old stamps, thinking nobody would want them, and just printed them for local use, local rates, because they had all these commemorative sets, but no one had they didn't have 10-cent stamps.
Of course, the big challenge right now is to find them all postally used.
But that's me.
Yeah. That is the big.
I have all this stuff used. I mean, not the specialty things, but the standard run.
Oh yeah, I probably do have as well, Steve. But as you say, getting the ones that are gold dust are the errors on errors on covers, and particularly getting them on commercial covers rather than just philatelic covers.
No, well, some of the stuff is not so well. 95% of what you show is rare because you're showing the one-off things, the two-off things. But sometimes the mislocated if the X's are like up you know, halfway up the stamp, the whole sheets and sheets and sheets were done like that, and it's all got used that way in the post office. And you know, I get the commercial mail with the stuff on it, so it's normal. You know, if you have 25 of the same thing, I think of it as normal.
Yeah. Oh, the ones with the errors on are the ones that are, you know, the real gold dust in many ways.
Right, right.
So, Joan, has the Fiji overprints taken the record for the longest Zoom?
Longest what?
I wouldn't have a clue, Tony.
It's getting there, Tony. It's getting there. Let's not try to reach that mark.
I honestly wouldn't know, but it's bound to be up there somewhere.
Well, I'm going to get a nasty note from Zoom that I've exceeded.
Oh dear.
Look, anyway, thank you everyone very much, and thank you, Andrew. It's much appreciated, and it's a topic that needs a good book. Good book.
It's good. I'm glad this happened
It
tonight.
also needs a hell of a lot of collaboration, Tony. That's all I'm going to say to that. No,
And so it shall happen.
Thank you all. I hope you all enjoyed.
Very much.
It was
Thank
good.
you,
Andy.
Great.
Andy.
Great.
Believe me, it was no small feat putting 120 frames together on that Zoom, because a lot of it involves scanning first, cropping, sorting out, and then working out what I was going to do and how I was going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like
So,
someone said, your
thank you,
book's
Steve,
already.
for dropping me in it.
Are you going to exhibit it?
But we got there. We got there in the end. I actually got it finished at the beginning of last week. I was actually a week in front of when I thought I would get it finished. So didn't do too bad.
And good.
But the main thing is, you all enjoyed it. You all found it interesting. That's the main thing. Dog for a walk, and then I'm hitting my bed.
Sounds good. Thank you again, Andrew.
Thanks, Andy.
No worries.
Thanks, Andy.
No worries.
Thank you, Steve.